and welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name is Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the Clinic Director. In the video today we're going to be taking another look at integration, but from a slightly different angle. Normally we talk about integration in terms of the way that the final phase of treatment occurs, which is sort of the integration of all the dissociative aspects of a person's kind of condition, I suppose, within, say, Dissociative Identity Disorder or Other Specified Dissociative Disorders, DID and OSDD, are actually sort of pulled together and work in some degree of harmony. Now, as I've established in another video, this isn't about fusion, which is the sort of like all the parts ended up kind of coming together and forming just like a single part, if you like. So integration can take place, all the parts can still be present and they work comfortably together, they're collaborative and allow sort of just ordinary operational life in, just everyday activity. The type of integration we're looking at today is interesting because it's something that I talk about quite a bit at the end of therapy. So within, say, 3 to 6 months left within therapy, assuming that everything's gone successfully, this is something that I think needs to take place. It's really interesting that a question came from one of the subscribers about this, just looking at, the integrating into everyday life after being dissociative. And what can happen often is that dissociation sort of takes the place of the normal filter of everyday life. So it removes emotions, or it can sort of like produce effects or different things within depersonalization and derealization that a person sort of has to live with, and it becomes the lens through which they go through everyday life. So regardless of what's happening, whether it's being awake, whether it's sleeping, whether it's eating, playing, being with friends, being alone, whatever it is, the lens of dissociation is something that is pretty much present all of the time in one form or another. Now, the goal of therapy isn't to sort of like take away all the parts and everything, unless that's what a person is interested in. The goal of therapy is to reduce the dissociation. Now, as I've said before in another video, actually, if you start removing dissociation, it can make things worse, because dissociation being a filter to all of the noise and all the detail and all of the stress and anxiety and everything that comes from everyday life is often held by that dissociation, and that numbness or that kind of the lack of connection with those things is what the person is left with. So when we talk about integration with 3 to 6 months left to go in therapy, we're talking about how to cope in the world when you're less dissociative. And that may sound like a really obvious thing to do, but it's incredibly difficult for a lot of people to achieve, and that's why therapy is so important, because it really does kind of work with an individual and all of their parts to try and make a life for themselves when dissociation is no longer that lens. So realistically, what we're doing is starting to recalibrate or reboot everyday life without dissociation being present. Now, that does mean that more emotions are going to get through. It means that more stress is going to get through. It means that there's less avoidance. Then there's a lot more active participation in life for a lot of people, which can be terrifying, because dissociation sort of stops people really wanting to get into the world and get a lot of stuff done. And if you take away the dissociation, there is a pressure from the world to be active and to be involved in it. Now, that's not necessarily a pressure that a person has to succumb to. If a person wants to remain distant or remain away from people or remain away from different aspects and groups in society, that's absolutely fine. That's what they want. That's what they should be able to have. But there is stuff that needs to get done, and doing it without the dissociation can be very noisy, can be very overwhelming, and can be very stressful. Because take it from me, as a non-dissociative person, just going through everyday life, even with all the sort of like the resources and the facilities, the friends, the network, the family, all of those things around, life is really, really hard. So we're not saying that as soon as a person becomes dissociative, life suddenly becomes really easy, because it may not. For some people, it can actually get harder. Now, they might be present all the time. They might have a lot less amnesia for things, and they might be much more present in their body and present in the world. But that doesn't make their experience of everyday life simpler. It just requires practice, it requires skill, and it requires a lot of thoughtful help and resourcing to encourage that person to start learning a new way of going about life. And the beauty of this is that even though it can be really difficult, that's where the fulfillment comes in. I'm a firm believer in that dissociation stops us really living life in colour, and it kind of makes everything a bit black and white. So it can be simpler and it can be a lot more basic for some folks, but it doesn't have the richness and the texture of life that truly makes it worth living. To be able to connect with people, with animals, with things in the world, with experiences, to be fully present and have that absolute kind of connection to all of those things is really what makes life so amazing. And it is glorious, and there's so many wonderful things out there. It doesn't have to require a lot of resources. It can be just very simple everyday things. So let's say for a dissociative person, going for a walk in a park may not be possible because the dissociation may disconnect them from that environment. It may move them away from that environment. If a person comes into the park, they might get scared, they might get frightened, and the amnesia might kick in and they may relocate themselves. So going for a walk in a park without dissociation can mean just walking to the park, finding a bench, sitting down and being quiet and just listening and watching, maybe feeding some birds or just watching the squirrels play, or just being a participant in the world and starting to feel the connections, maybe being able to develop friendships and being able to meet someone in the park and have a cup of coffee and a chat. So when we start reducing the dissociation, the likelihood of these events start taking place, but it requires confidence, and confidence is something that has to be built from the bottom up, because dissociation often takes away a person's confidence completely because the trauma may have done that and the dissociation keeps it at that level. So the therapy is about trying to integrate the person into the world, to build a bridge between their dissociative traumatized self that is being healed and recovered into the world, to be happy, to be fulfilled, and to feel like there is a purpose to be had within that place. So that's why I really think integration is two separate things. It's the integration of all the internal world, great, that's really, really important. And it's the integration of the self and that internal world to the outside world. It's that bridge between one and another so it becomes fully connected. And it's not done as a piecemeal part thing, it's done as a complete process. And I think therapists really do get involved with this and try and find goals and try and find activities and do all sorts of things, and helping people understand friendships and relationships and activities and employment and education and whatever it might be, just to be able to find that place for that person so that they feel like they belong. Because trauma and dissociation often stops people feeling they belong anywhere. It's all about survival, and integration should be about a sense of belonging, both internally and externally. So I hope that that's been a useful video to just truly understand what it is that we're working towards. You may have started out on therapy or considering doing therapy, and you're at those early stabilization, or you're in the middle of trauma exploration, and this integration phase, this third thing, might seem like a little bit of an oddball, like what is that? What is it all about? I hope that this video has really given a bit of a sense of the different complexities that are involved in that integration process. As always, please do leave the comments at the end. That's really great. Really look forward to listening to those, and that's where a lot of the ideas for these videos come from, because people ask such fantastic questions or give such great insights, and that really gives me the opportunities for knowing what kind of things people are looking for. So thanks ever so much for that. Please do like, subscribe, share the video as useful, either with networks or with therapists. I think that's a really wonderful thing for people to do. And we'll keep making these videos for you because they do seem useful. That's the feedback that we're getting. Okay, so between now and the next video, as always, please do take great care.